Oh my god, dude! When you did that fucking thing on stream earlier, where you were reading and like that one word was capitalized, you just screamed it.
Sometimes, because a lot of times I'll capitalize my name. So if like a character is talking about me on the screen, I'll be like, and now we have to go meet up with Dookie. What is love? Baby, don't hurt me. Don't hurt me no more.
Jesus. This is gonna get real interesting. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to The Gaming Effect. I'm your co-host, Alex, aka Soldier First Class.
And I am Corey, aka Dookie03.
And we are here with episode 16. Today we're going to be talking about quite a few things, but don't forget to like, share, whatever on the podcast on all listening platforms. Do the things. We are on Spotify, iTunes, and my YouTube channel. I stopped actually uploading to SoundCloud because we weren't getting any traction there, like maybe one view here and there, but really wasn't getting anything on there, and it costs money to keep things on there. So, at least to have an account that allows you to. So, I will not be uploading to SoundCloud anymore.
Rip.
I can't. Rip SoundCloud. I canceled the membership. So, anyway. Want to thank you all for the support on the last episode where we talked about, the potential of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and social media. We're actually going to talk a little bit about that episode today, but we got almost 100 plays, which is by and far our most played episode. So I wanted to say thank you guys for that. Really appreciate it. It means a lot that people are enjoying the show, that they're commenting, they're doing the thing. So we really appreciate it. Got anything to add?
Not really. Just thanks for watching or listening the podcast, and keep on keeping on. By the way, are you doing a review video of Rebirth?
I plan to at some point. I'm not sure when, and I'm not sure how I'm gonna do it. Like if it's gonna be like a scripted video or if I'm just gonna go off the cuff. But
right.
Okay. So I'm not sure how I'm gonna do it yet. I'm working on a hard mode guide type thing for it. So working on that currently while we're sitting here. Not sitting here doing it, but anyway.
Doing it right now.
Yeah, I'm literally editing. No, I'm kidding.
He's just playing it on hard mode. That's how fucking good he is.
Yeah.
Right now.
So anyway, let's go ahead and get started. What have you been playing / been excited for?
Yeah, so I just finished Final Fantasy 2, and it was a game.
Certainly a game of
one of the games of all time. So I played the Pixel remaster, and it was much better. The last time I tried playing it was the PS1 version in like Final Fantasy Origins, and I bailed, I think, during the Dreadnought, which is like a little ways in, like not super far in, I guess, maybe a quarter of the way. And yeah, I don't know. The Pixel remaster made it a lot more playable, but would I say it made it good? No, I don't think so. It's the unfortunate thing with Final Fantasy 2 is it does have really good music and it has really good characters, and for a game like an NES era game, I do really enjoy the story. Like people shit on the story because they're like, oh, it's fetch quest the story. But I mean, that's kind of what stories were back then. And it does a good job of like making you feel like you're a big part of the rebellion instead of just like there's a rebellion going on and you're doing the odd thing for them. Like you're kind of like the main guy when it comes to like help, like do it, like making the rebellion successful. So
kind of like Final Fantasy VI a little bit,
but I would say Final Fantasy VI is like, I don't know. I think this does maybe a better job of making you feel like you're like the big essential part of the rebellion, because you're constantly like, you'll do something big that helps out the rebellion, and then you'll come back and you're like always like 1-to-1 with the leader of the rebellion, whereas in Final Fantasy VI, you just have like that one segment where you're with that, what's his name, Baran or something like that.
Yeah.
I can't remember. And then you never really have anything to do with the rebellion again after that in 6.
So I guess
You're
it's
kind of
kind of
crew.
Have you played
after that.
Suikoden?
Yeah.
So it's more like Suikoden
It's
then.
like a shitty Suikoden.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Suikoden's amazing.
Suikoden does a really good job of that too.
Yeah, it does.
Mm-hmm. Suikoden, dude. So everybody's always like, play Suikoden 2, play Suikoden 2. And like, yeah, play Suikoden 2. But I think it was last year or the year before I played Suikoden 1 and 2 before. And I'm like one of those guys that I have to play the first game and I have to play them in order. Like I'm really bad for that. Same with like movies. Like you can tell me something sucks ass as much as you want, but I'm always going to be like, yeah, but I really want to start with the first one. And I've done it and got burnt before. Like East 1 and 2 have turned me completely off the East series because I just hate mazes and they're super fucking mazy. There are things that can make mazes not shitty, but it doesn't have any of those features.
Yeah.
I did kind of enjoy East 1, but when I fired up East 2 and it was literally like the exact same game, basically, I was like, no, I can't do this. And that was a big part of why it kind of rolls into the next game I was playing, which was Phantasy Star 2. And I was looking forward to it, man, because I loved Phantasy Star 1. I played the Switch kind of remake-y thing, which is literally just the Master System version with a self-filling map. And like it blew my mind because the graphics, like, so you had like the NES and the Sega Master System at that time, right? Like these were like 80s, late 80s, early 90s consoles. And Phantasy Star 1 came out at the same time as Final Fantasy 1 in Japan. And like the graphical, the music, the story, the world is so much more like superior in every way in Phantasy Star than the NES version of Final Fantasy 1. Like the early version of Final Fantasy 1 looks like those, like, you know, those early NES games where it's just like the background is black and like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Like when you play like not Super Mario Brothers, but Mario Brothers and like Donkey Kong. Like Final Fantasy 1 really kind of has that ancient NES vibe. Whereas like you fire up the original Phantasy Star, which came out, I think, 2 weeks after Final Fantasy 1, and it's like vibrant colors, like massive fucking like connect different planets you're exploring, like all these huge, vast, labyrinthy dungeons and stuff, and like the bosses are great, the stories are great, the characters are great. Like it was so, and when I say all this stuff is great, I mean great for that time. I'm not saying Phantasy Star 1 is the greatest JRPG of all time. I'm saying Phantasy Star 1 blew my cock clean off compared to like NES Final Fantasy games and even like Dragon Quest games up to like between Dragon Quest 1 and 2. Like it was so much better than what we got on the NES, and it's just crazy. So coming off of that high of Phantasy Star, because I played Phantasy Star for the first time last year, I think, yeah, and I was like, okay, so I've been doing these videos, Dragon Quest versus Final Fantasy, and what I'm doing is I'm comparing like Dragon Quest 1 to Final Fantasy 1, and then the next episode is going to be Dragon Quest 2 to Final Fantasy 2, just like each iteration. And like a lot of the people in the comments are like, yeah, but it's not going to be fair at times because of like generation gaps and stuff like that, like as far as console gaps. But I'm more looking at like, to me, like I'm not like a big graphics whore either, right? So people have to keep that in mind. But I'm looking at like changes in the formula and like improvements in the formula in each iteration compared to each other, right? So that's kind of more of the look. And like a good game is a good game, right? Like It doesn't matter if it's on the NES or if it's on the PS2. I mean, take a look at, I won't be comparing them because there's no Dragon Quest 13 yet. But if you take a look at like Final Fantasy 13 versus like Dragon Quest 4, Dragon Quest 4 beats it out of the water like any time of day. But Anyways, so I've been using footage from my streams for and like replaying like Dragon Quest 2, Final Fantasy 2 just to refresh, and so I can write the scripts and do these videos and stuff like that. You should check out the first one. It's on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/DukeIsOut. Anyways, I was like, hey, I need to buy time because I did Final Fantasy 1 and Dragon Quest 1, and it was a lot of like it was probably the most editing I've ever done in a video ever. Like, it was crazy. It took a long time to make.
And I know your editing process, so I know it took you forever.
It did, yeah. It took me, I think, 2 or 3 months. So anyways, I was like, I need a buffer game, and I loved Phantasy Star 1, so I was like, let's do this. Let's do Phantasy Star 2. And people were saying, hey, it's kind of shit, but if you have maps and stuff, it's not that bad. But the dungeons are really big, and they're really mazy and stuff like that. So I'm like, yeah, whatever. Like, I played Vi on the Sega CD, which is a very like obscure, very, very difficult JRPG that had some mazy segments and was very, very grindy. And I didn't really have a problem with it. But yeah, we played Phantasy Star 2, and it was fucking terrible. It was awful. It was like,
yeah, I saw you rage quit, and I was like, oh shit, it must be real bad.
It takes quite a bit for me to rage quit. Like, I got really far into like even like Final Fantasy 13 before I rage quit, like really, really far. I got to like the last area, and then I bailed. But it was I rage quit in the first dungeon in Phantasy Star 2, and people are like, first dungeon, so he played 15 minutes of a game and quit? No, the first dungeon is like 3 hours long, and you die, and then you lose everything, and you have to start over because the dungeon is so big, and there's no like escape spell or like evac spell or anything like that to get out. So it's like, it's so weird. I've never played a JRPG like this where you have to like make multiple trips into the first dungeon to like, okay, there's a helmet on the fucking second floor. Let's go get the helmet. Okay, now we gotta fucking leave and go back to town. Like, have you ever played a JRPG like that where you have to like make several trips to like get one item at a time and then come back and get another one and then leave and come back?
Other than an MMO, no.
Yeah, like, it's crazy, dude. And like, I think I made like three successful trips, and then like I kept trying for that fourth trip and to get like to like the end of the dungeon, and I just couldn't. I would die, or I would get like where I could almost do it, and then I was like, fuck, I am out of items. And I'm like, all right, now we gotta head back out of the dungeon. I gotta go 4 floors of incredible fucking horrible mazes, and every floor looks the same. So every time you get in a battle, here's my other big issue. Like, my 2 biggest issues with games, especially JRPGs, is mazes and fucking mazes. No, puzzles. Mazes and puzzles. Yeah, I'm not a big puzzle guy. But here's the thing. If there are ways to make mazes and puzzles not that bad, and there are ways to make them infinitely worse. And the way to make them infinitely worse is to have a random encounter all the time when you're trying to get like, or situate yourself and figure out where the fuck to go. Even with maps, like I had like maps downloaded. I was ready, right? And like, I was like, wow, all these floors look identical. So every time I'd get in a battle, I'd be like, fuck, now what floor am I in? What on when I would like get out of the battle? So I had to look at all the maps, try and like fucking figure shit out. It was a nightmare. It was horrible. I hated it.
So
I hated it so much.
What you're telling me is that you loved Phantasy Star 2.
I did not like it. I did not like it very much.
So pretty sure no one will be surprised by this, but I've been playing Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth. I'm working my way towards potentially playing Dragon's Dogma 2, but right now I'm working on hard mode for Rebirth. Really enjoying it. I obviously I think people are not going to be surprised that I did not like the ending of the game.
I don't think anybody did.
You'd be surprised. So I went into Rebirth this time being mentally prepared for what was going to happen. I think the problem was the first time is that I was fully expecting it to be a not 1-to-1. I never expected that, but a remake, right?
Yeah.
And then when the ending got there, and it was what it was, and I had gotten a review copy, so I had to sit there and wait on it for a week to see what everybody else was even going to say when they started up the game, let alone finish it in a week or so. So I was sitting on the ending for quite a while. And I was thinking like, oh, people are going to hate this. And when it turned out that wasn't the case, I did not handle it well. So fast forward 4 years and going into Rebirth, because this fucker right here was like, oh, yeah, man, the trailers look really good. Like
they did. The game looks like decent.
It is really good. Gameplay wise, it's really good. All the mini games are fun. Well, not all of them, but most of them are fun. And so I went into this with a lot more of a level head. I saw the ending. I didn't really feel anything, which to me was an issue. Like, I have spent, spoiler alert here for Final Fantasy VII, the original, but I went into that expecting the same emotion that I was going to have at the first time. And I know, like, obviously it's coming or whatever, and you can say it's coming, and it's probably not going to affect you in the same way, obviously. Because
now everyone in the comments is going to be like, way to ruin it! Way to spoil it! Dude, I put a comment. I put a comment on somebody else's video, and it was like, I was like, oh man, they ruined the whole like scene with Eris at the end, and like all my replies are like, you fucking ruined it. It's like, dude, you don't think like the moment at all is gonna happen, like at all? Like I didn't say like what happened.
Yeah, you just
they're just gonna be like, could you imagine if they did just like skip that part completely?
Oh, dude. So if you know the original, then you already know what I'm talking about. But I went into it hoping that with it being in HD and 3D and everything else, this time, that they were going to do it in a way that I would go into, or I would come out of it feeling at least like something, right? Mm-hmm. And I just didn't feel anything. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I wasn't like happy that they pulled it off. I wasn't anything. It was weird. I was like, what is this feeling I'm supposed to have? And then I talked about it on SEAL Team 7, which shout out to Baby Seal for having me on the show. We talked about it, and I said the same thing on there, that I didn't feel anything. And he's like, maybe, basically the gist of it was that maybe that was kind of the point, that we haven't gotten closure like we did in the original. And that's why I don't feel anything. Like, I'm going through the stages of grief, which is like, one is denial, which is exactly what the characters are going through right now. Like, and I guess in some way that's true. Like, I don't want to make it sound so fucking dramatic, but I'm grieving the ending not giving me what I wanted, I guess. So I'm kind of in denial at this point that they did what they did with it. But yeah, overall the game's great. I would give it a 9 out of 10. Some story changes that I didn't really care for, involving Dyne, and involving Aerith, of course.
What did they do with all the single ladies himself?
Roche? Roche?
Yeah.
Oh, he actually had a really interesting plot line in this game. I won't spoil it because I think people need to see it. But it's actually, I thought it was really well done. It kind of plays into the whole, like, so throughout the game, Cloud's, like, having the headaches and basically they believe he's suffering from the soldier degradation. Like, he's breaking down slowly, right?
Like Roche is?
Yeah, well, Cloud. And then, like, so that comes into play with Roche also. And there's a lot of, like, the black-robed people walking around, and that kind of comes into play, like they're saying,
Jehovah's Witnesses, we always call
yeah them. So it's like you're not, like, basically the party is trying to ensure Cloud, or like back up Cloud and say, hey, you're not going to be like these guys, And it all kind of comes together and stuff, and it's really, really well done. Austin Lee Matthews knocked it out of the park with Roche. Really enjoyed that part, so shout out to him. Other than that, I've just been playing hard mode. Been kind of waiting for Dragon's Dogma 2 to get some performance patches, so I can play it and not really be bogged down by it. Like, it's going to be at 30 FPS, I already know that, but I would like it to actually be at 30 FPS.
Oh, really?
And
It's fluctuating?
Yeah, it's fluctuating when you go into towns with a lot of people, so I'm trying to, like, wait for it to get some patches and stuff, get some performance boosts, and then I'll start playing it. But I like the first one.
Never hurts to save some money either.
Right, and it might, once the patches come out, it might go on sale or something like that. So it's not like I have to do it right now because I'm playing Rebirth and playing the hard mode and stuff. So I'm not like, I'm kind of getting the FOMO for it, but not really, I guess. Like, it's there in the back of my head, but not enough that I'm like losing my mind over it yet. But other than that, I really haven't looked at anything else. Stellar Blade demo came out today.
Right.
I'm interested to try that eventually once I...
Damn, that chick looks good.
Yeah. I think they actually modeled her after a Korean model.
Yeah, they did. I bet her Instagram fucking exploded after
I bet. Revealed. Yeah, I bet it did too. I bet her Twitter, Instagram, all her social medias probably blew up after that.
Yep.
Because people are straight gooning for Stellar Blade.
Yes, we are.
But, so... Yeah, I think that's about it for me on the things I'm excited for that we've been playing. So we kind of want to get into our next topic, and this kind of goes kind of a callback to what we talked about last time when it comes to social media and stuff. But if you don't know, Maximilian Dude just finished Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and I'll say this because I don't want it to sound like it's coming off like hero worship or like that I'm coming to the rescue of somebody. I made a video a couple days ago talking about this Max Dude drama stuff, and basically what happened is that he finished the game, he came up with a theory, he made a couple statements after the game theory. Yeah, made a couple statements after the game came out, and then was on the Easy Allies podcast, and basically reiterated those theories and statements, and he was starting to get a lot of toxicity aimed towards him. And now I understand he's a YouTuber / streamer. He's got a very large channel, over 1 million subscribers, several 100,000 followers on Twitch and stuff. So like, I get he's gonna get toxicity. We all do. We all put ourselves out there on the internet and stuff. My problem is that when you start making threats, or you start trying to get somebody's channel pulled down, which I've gone through, people contacting your sponsors, stuff like that. Like, that's where I draw the line.
And that's people try affecting your personal life, right?
Right.
Like
and that's why I made the video, because I'm like, you know what? He may not need somebody to protect him or come to his defense, but he's not the only content creator getting this stuff. He's not the only person on the internet getting this stuff. And if we can get eyes on this situation with Max being the victim here, then we can make sure that other people in the space understand what is going on. Because if they're even going to go after Max Dude, who is right now, I would say, is the #1 Final Fantasy VII streamer currently when it comes to viewership, everything else.
#2 in my books.
Thank you.
And shout out to Night Sky Prince.
Wow. Thanks, buddy. No, but shout out to Ryan at Night Sky Prince. So, with the whole situation, it reminded me of what I went through 4 years ago when people were contacting Square Enix. They were contacting my sponsors, and they were contacting, trying to get a hold of me. They were making threats in my DMs. They were making threats in comment sections. They were harassing me constantly and basically causing me to walk away from content creation and just get off social media. I mean, I deleted all social medias off my phone for a while. I barely talked to my friends. I barely talked to just about anybody but my wife. And these people tried to ruin my fucking life over a video game. And so I know what Max is going through right now, and really hit
It'd be
home
on
for
a
me.
larger scale,
Right, and even larger scale.
Yeah.
And it hit home for me because I saw that, and it just reminded me of those days that I went through that. And so I made that video because I wanted to put the statement out there that we're fucking tired of this shit. We are tired of every time that we say something you don't like, that people get on the internet and they decide to fucking make threats against your family or threats against you or try to ruin your fucking life over pixels. And it really bothered me. Right.
In this case.
Right. So I think what we're trying to say is that, and while I don't agree with using the word gatekeeping, something that is functionally similar to it needs to happen here. We need to let people know that this is not okay, that this is not acceptable, and just keep these people out of the fandom.
The same, but yeah, I know what you mean.
Right?
Like,
it's functionally similar, but it's not.
Yeah. I know what you
the
mean.
actual definition of gatekeeping. It's just making sure that you're curating the space that you want to be in.
Yeah, it needs to be a healthier space, and that's the internet as a whole. Honestly, needs to be a more healthy space. People need to stop tolerating people being like toxic as fuck. And like I said, there's levels to toxicity too. Like,
right,
there's a little bit of toxicity is okay. Like calling people out on shit, that's fine. It's when it comes to like literal harassment, you know what I mean? That's when, when it's a problem.
Well,
like,
it's like
making fun of like, oh, you like Kingdom Hearts, blah blah blah, like whatever. The other thing is, I think we probably did when we did like our bullying podcast like a long ass time ago. I know on my other podcast we did a bullying episode too, and like one of the biggest like eye openers for me when I was like super young in high school was like it kind of like flipped a switch when people were like, oh, this guy likes video games. And it's like eventually I was like, wait, like, yeah, I do. Like, so why like, you know what I mean? Like, so why do I care that they're like, this guy likes Final Fantasy 9? It's like, yeah, I do. So like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I do. So how is that making fun of me at that point?
Right.
Like, well, that's,
and I think
you kind of got to own your likes and dislikes, right?
I think too, people just assume that toxicity is overtly negative. And I think that there's a perception problem with that because you can be positive and still be toxic. Like somebody that's like, oh, you don't like this? Oh, you're fucking stupid, or
right.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, that's
there are two separate kinds of toxicity, and they're both really bad. Like the people that came after me were actually on the positive side of Remake. It's the people that didn't like the changes in Remake that were like, okay, man, we hear you, you know, we may not agree on every single point that you made, but, you know, whatever. Whereas the people that liked Remake were the ones that came after me. And so it's something that people, I think, don't realize, or they don't necessarily understand in the moment, that even if you're positive and your words come off as positive to other people, it can still be toxic regardless of if it's positive or negative. So I think that's something that people need to pay attention to when they interact also.
I think a big part of the toxic positivity crowd, like when it comes to gaming, is the consumers, or you should just buy it anyways, or the you should be happy you're getting anything at all crowd. You know
right.
what I mean?
I hate that shit.
Those are the worst. Because that's the reason the gaming world is where it is now, is those people. And like, I know a lot of them have been groomed to be that way at this point, because like a lot of these people are guys that started playing video games halfway through like the PS3 era, right? And that's when like the DLC and like that stuff started happening, right? And that's kind of like what they've been conditioned to like. I don't know why I did this. Look like a fucking dumbass robot or something.
Yeah.
But it's those guys piss me off the most, because they're doing honestly the most damage. Not only are they being like incredibly toxic to like people with differing opinions and stuff like that, but they're also like enabling the gaming industry to be as predatory as it is nowadays, and to like not give a shit when they do make projects, right?
Well, it's
like look at fucking Metal Gear Survive. Like fuck that. Like there wasn't a huge following of people that were supporting that game, but the whole might as well buy it, like you should buy it anyways. What if you don't like it? Or you know what else, dude? You know what else brings my piss to a boil? The crowd that is like, you're not allowed to have an opinion because you didn't buy the game or complete it. Like, okay, so apparently I'm not allowed to have an opinion on fucking Phantasy Star 2 because the first dungeon made me want to rip my hair out. Like, oh, maybe the rest. Oh, who knows? The rest of the game might be better.
Right.
Spoiler alert, it only gets worse.
Well, it's like, okay, when you were talking about Final Fantasy 16 a while back, like you knew that you weren't going to like it because it's an action, it's a character action game / RPG, and you just knew that it wasn't for you. And everybody was like, well, even if it's not for you, you should just still buy it to support the devs.
Yes.
And it's like, no, that's not a good mentality to have, because if you have that mentality, like if you pay your money for something, you are endorsing that product.
Exactly.
So by showing people that you enjoy those things, it doesn't matter if you enjoy them or not. You bought them. So the developers will see, I mean, yeah, they'll see the feedback, but the developers will see the sales, and they'll be like, okay, even though people were talking about it in this light, this is what people want, because that's what the sales say. And I don't agree with those people that say, oh, you should just buy it anyway. I'm not going to pay money on something I'm not going to like. Or, if it's on sale, I might buy it, because I feel comfortable buying it at that price point. But to just say you should pay $70 for this game that you may or may not like, and you probably think you won't because it's not a genre you play, like, I get that. And I'm not going to sit there. Like, I bust your balls all the time about stuff, and you bust mine too, but I'm not going to sit here and be like, Corey, you should just buy the game anyway because I like that game and I want them to make more.
Yeah.
So you should buy it. I'm not going to do that. That's just dumb. But, I mean, that just goes into people's tastes and everything else, and it's just one of those things. Like,
I'm just glad you said we bust each other's balls instead of bust each other's nuts.
Well, I mean, that's, outside of podcast talk. But, so, yeah, anyway, guys, I think the message here is that no matter what side you're on, whether it be the positive or the negative, just fucking treat each other better, please.
Yeah, that's what
there is no point in this, in sucking the fun out of video games when that is exactly what they're supposed to be. Fun.
Exactly.
And when you take somebody's love for something away from them, that's just one of the worst things you can do for somebody. And, it happened to me. Max has already pretty much said he's done with making Final Fantasy VII content, at least on the theory crafting side. And I don't blame him, because I did the same thing. So just remember that your words do have an effect, and that is both on the positive and the negative. So
I have to make a bit of a confession here. I am not a fan of like the whole theory crafting side of gaming. Like, to me, and this is like another issue I always had with Final Fantasy VII, was like I felt like the game had like a lot of like plot holes and like stuff like that, and I think that's what spawned the whole theory crafting thing. And to me, like I like theory crafting when it's like I saw a trailer and the game's coming out next year. Like, to me, that's the exciting part to me.
Right.
The theory crafting when it comes to like after the game's been out, you've beaten the game. The only stuff like I really like is like connections to other games and stuff, or like the world, a little bit of like the world's history, like in Final Fantasy VIII, like there's like the whole, okay, the lunar cry happened and that's why there's that big crater and stuff. Like, that stuff interests me, but I'm not gonna like come up with like these like wild theories and stuff about it. But at the same time, I'm not going to shit on someone who is theory crafting. You know what I mean? And that's, I think, the approach that people need to take.
Well, and I like theory crafting when it's based in reality. Like,
yeah, that's the other thing too.
So when I made videos about Final Fantasy VII Remake and some of the theories that I had come up with, a lot of them were based in stuff that was in the game. It wasn't something that I was coming up with off the top of my head to throw out there. It was events that had happened in the game that I had deep dove into and had kind of put the pieces together on why this theory was even possible. And I try to leave as few holes in the theory as possible to make it seem more realistic. And that's why I think, and I'm not bragging here. I'm mostly saying that I think that's why some of my theories have ended up being true, because I try.
They're not outlandish.
They're
outlandish. Based on thing. Yeah.
Right.
They're based on solid evidence, I guess.
They're not like, this happened, so this crazy thing's gonna happen. No, it's like, okay, in Remake, I had the theory that Aerith knew more about what was going on than she was letting on. That ended up being true.
Right.
But I based that on stuff that she had said in the game.
And done.
And the way the camera angles had been done, like in cinema and stuff, when you know a character's lying or when they're hiding something, they always do a pan shot across their mouth where all you can see is from here. And it's almost like they're lying, and that the camera is showing you that they're lying. There were scenes in Remake like that, and that's where I had come up with the theory that she knew more than she was letting on, because all of the signs were there, and then I ended up being right. But I think that's because I had based it off something that I had personally seen and gone through, and knew from my love of film, my love of TV shows, camera work, stuff like that, and it helps, I think, ground your theories in reality.
What is your favorite movie? I don't know if I've ever asked.
My favorite movie, then it's going to be funny because it has none of that stuff.
You told me once, and it was like a Pixar style DreamWorksy movie, wasn't it, or something?
No, Tommy Boy.
Oh no, okay, I can't remember. There was something else we were talking about, and it was there was something about movies or something, and you said it was like a Pixar or a DreamWorks thing, and I remember you saying, but Tommy Boy's a fucking great movie.
Tommy Boy's a great movie.
That is one of the best movies.
Oh yeah, for sure. Richard, what's happening?
Yeah, dude.
But so anyway, guys, this kind of leads into our next topic, which is the main topic of the episode, and that is. Would you like to reveal that?
Weren't we going to talk about the other topic first?
I don't know.
Failure?
Yeah, let's go with sure. Well, do you want to do the video game endings or the failure part?
First?
Yeah, yes.
Let's do failure first.
Okay.
Because it's not, I don't think that would be as long.
Yeah, probably not. So, our question to you and to ourselves today is, what is failure, or what do you consider failure? And, feel free to chime in. Let us know any times that you feel like you failed or anything like that, and maybe even how you overcame that failure, because we're going to talk about that as part of it as well. So, give us some stuff in the comments, or give us some type of thing in the question or the polls or whatever we put on the podcast episode on Spotify and iTunes. And yeah, so would you like to start this one, since this was your idea?
Yeah. So I basically the whole reason the topic kind of came to my mind is just I ended up doing that kickboxing tournament. I was sick as fuck. My coach was telling me hey, do you still want to do this? And I was like, yes, I feel like I need to. I came all this way. I trained for 6-7 weeks. I got in shape. I cut weight. I did all the things. And I felt like, you know what? If I don't do well, it's not the biggest deal in the world, because I know what I'm going in here with. I had a fractured toe. There was a ton of things not in my favor. And did I do well? Fuck no. I think I did awful. I was not happy with my performance at all. But do I regret doing it? Absolutely not. And that is when I come to think, that's when it came to me, what is failure? Because going there, I lost in like my first fight, right? Like I've done karate tournaments and stuff like that. I've never done like full like kickboxing, anything like that, right? And for those of you wondering, no, I did not get like knocked out or anything. I just lost by decision. But it was, I would say, I wouldn't treat it as a success because of how disappointed I was in how I did. But I don't know if I can call that a failure because, like, if I took two scenarios, if I looked at the scenario where I said I didn't do it, I still feel like I feel better. Like I got more enjoyment, I got more experience, I got more knowledge, and all that from doing it. Like I feel like I don't know. I don't feel like it was a failure. And I think when it comes to other stuff in life, you really have to look at it like that too. Like, okay, I tried this and I failed at it, but did I, because I did it, I didn't do it well. But like, if I look at the other side where I didn't do it at all, is this a failure or is that a failure? You know what I mean?
I want to chime in on this because I do know what you mean exactly. I would consider...
I'm not saying I know what failure is. I'm saying, like, what is failure then? Because of my thoughts on this, right? Like, what the hell is failure then, if not that?
So in my opinion, failure in this situation is kind of multi-tiered.
Mm-hmm.
Like, would you consider the fact that you lost a failure?
Yes.
Technically, by definition, yes.
Yeah.
Like, if you were to take a moral victory out of it, I don't think you failed because you went through with it.
Yeah.
And I think, like, to me, failure is when you choose not to do something because you are either afraid of the outcome.
And there's nothing wrong with that either.
And there's nothing wrong with that either. But I would consider failing... It's such a weird concept because...
Yeah. And I've never thought of it. I've never thought of failure like this before in my entire life.
Well, I think it's because, there are levels to it. Like, are you failing
like
because you...
There's layers.
Yeah. Like an onion. I'm way too fucked up for you to be saying shit like that because you're going to get me off track. There's levels to it. So I think that, like, to fail is to just not do it.
Not do.
Do you know what I mean? Failure to me is not doing it. And if you want to say that by losing you failed, then you'd be right. But if you wanted to say that you didn't fail because you went through with it, I would agree with that too.
Yeah.
I think failure is defined by the person and not by the external stimulus. Like, I think that, like, if you were
first person, like, feeling, maybe,
right? Well, and if you think about it, like, if you
a third person one,
if you were to take 10 people in a room and add an 11th person in there and have them do something, 9 out of 10 might think that they failed at that something they did, or 9 out of the 10 might say they did it, so they were successful, but they didn't complete what they were trying to do.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a failure.
Yeah.
It's weird. Like, you don't know.
It's like if something's worth it, is it a failure?
Right.
I think that's what it boils down to. Like, as far as that level.
Right. I think too, though, you could say, well, like, somebody starts a business and then they run that business into the ground, whether on purpose or just poor practice or whatever.
Yeah, they don't have experience in running a business either, right?
That, I mean, do you say that the person failed? Yes. Do you say that they are a failure?
No, that's different, though.
You know what I mean? Like,
that's like a different...
Yeah, it's like, it's such a weird term that I never really thought about until you brought it up.
But even like your businessman scenario, how many fucking, like, hugely successful business people have started businesses that went under, like, 4 or 5 before they found success, right? Like, it's all crazy to...
I'm actually going to look up the definition of failure because I want to see what the actual
definition
is. So lack of success, the omission of expected or required action. So basically what it says is like, their failure to comply with the basic rules. So they failed to complete the action that they were required or expected to do. Right. They failed a task. So I guess technically failure is like a feeling. Right. It's multifaceted. Like it's a feeling and it's a status, I guess you would say.
Mm-hmm.
So like I look at it like this. So my YouTube channel, this is a perfect example, I think. I started this channel 4 or 5 years ago, I think it was. Well, it would have been 5 or 6 years ago, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that I was very successful at one point until I ran my channel into the ground and decided to basically, quote unquote, retire. Now, would you consider what I did a failure, or would you consider what I did a success? Because I think it's still different. I still got
left on your turn. You know what I mean? You chose to leave.
Right. But it's like some people would see what I did as a failure, and others would be glad to have the amount of subscribers and viewers and comments and likes and stuff that I was getting at the time. Like, there are people that would just love to have more than the viewers they have. And like, I think about that and it humbles me. It humbles me a lot, because I think like, how lucky was I that the algorithm hit for me? How lucky was I that I was able to build a community at the time? Like, I look at my success as more, I put in a lot of hard work, but I also had a lot of luck in my corner. And I don't know. I don't know if I would consider what I did a failure or not. I don't think so, because if you look at how you can. If you look at the things that I was able to do because of my channel, I got to go to PAX East and hang out with voice actors from Remake. I got to become friends with people that work for Square Enix. I got to meet some of my viewers and fans.
Interview the Gooch himself.
I got to interview Hironobu Sakaguchi himself. Yeah. Like the man, the myth, the legend himself. I got to sit down in an interview with him for an hour.
Like, that's incredible, man.
And that is something that no one will ever be able to take away from me.
That's incredible.
And that alone to me is a success. But I had a lot of failures on my way to get there. So I think
look at game developers. Like you see like a lot of, especially now, you see a lot of these like indie game developers that come out with like a really good game. Well, even like fucking Helldivers. Like, I don't know if you could call Helldivers 1 a failure, but not many people played Helldivers 1. And then they come out with Helldivers 2 and it's fucking exploding.
Yep.
There's tons of games from like these smaller companies that worked on like some shitty fucking McDonald's style game. You know what I mean? Like shitty adver games kind of thing. And that's where they got that's where they learned everything they learned to make like a really good high quality game. There's a ton of developers like that right now that are like coming out with absolute masterpieces, but their first like two, if you look at like their game, like the games they made, there's always like the first 1 or 2 are like some shitty Spider-Man game on like the Game Boy Advance or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, they have to start somewhere. You're not gonna walk into the industry and somebody's gonna get you to make like the next like Uncharted. You know what I mean? Like, nobody's gonna expect or trust that from you.
Right. I want to actually bring up this quote that I remembered from Thomas Edison. And basically what he said was, I've not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work.
Yeah.
And that's why failure is such a weird topic, because when you think about it, failing is like a necessary evil of success.
Absolutely. You learn way more from a failure than you ever will from success.
It's like if you've ever done sports or anything, they will tell you there's an old adage,
or you learn.
There's an old adage that you learn more from a loss than you ever will from a win.
Yep.
And I think that rings true in a lot of things. And that's why I don't necessarily like try to I don't try to say that people have failed necessarily.
Yeah.
Like, I had 2 YouTube channels that failed technically, before I made this one. So it's
Right.
like, I failed in YouTube multiple times before hitting it with this.
I
But
still want to see your Pokemon arc.
yeah, that shit's been deleted.
No, you don't even have it like backed up on. I have all my like cringy videos backed up.
No, I don't.
Not all of them, but most of them. I do.
Right. But yeah, so I think to me, failure isn't. It's kind of like it's just in the eye of the beholder. If you see yourself as a failure, then you're a failure. If you see yourself as somebody that's learning and growing as a person and figuring out ways how to do things better, I call that a success in my book.
Yeah.
So
that's a really good way of putting it and thinking about it, I think. But yeah, let us know in the comments. Tell us your stories of failure, or how, like you said, how you overcame failure, or how you took something that most people would consider a failure and used it to improve yourself or grow. Or
even just tell us like how you feel about failure. Like what do you think failure is? Because it's interesting because I think both of us are kind of on the same page about it. But I don't know how other people view it, and I think it'd be interesting, kind of a little experiment for the podcast to kind of know what you guys think of it. But with that, I guess that's it for that.
Speaking of failure, no. I always like try to segue, even if it's like super unnatural.
Yeah. Well, speaking of failure, why don't we talk about video game endings?
So I wanted to talk about video game endings because I didn't want to really focus on the Rebirth ending because there's like a lot going on about it, and we talked a lot about it at the start of the podcast and stuff like that.
Right, and I feel like we're trying not to spoil it, and it's still a brand new game, and everybody's still trying to finish it and stuff. So, So we're not gonna do specifics for Rebirth. But we will probably talk about old games.
Yeah, and
in depth,
and the ones we love, the ones we don't like, even shows and stuff.
Yeah.
But I did want to say before we get into that is when we were talking about like theory crafting and all that, and I said like I really like it in anticipation of stuff. And you were saying how in I think you said it was in Rebirth, how they were like backing Cloud, like being like, don't worry, man, you're not going to become one of those. What if that's the ending to the third game, is Cloud does become one of the Black Robe dudes? That would be crazy.
Well, I doubt they'll do that because they've really hammered away at the live stream scene being the most important scene in the next game. So,
that's too bad.
And that's where Cloud kind of finds himself. So I doubt that's going to be a thing. Although it would be kind of funny if they did.
That would be kind of cool.
Because at this point, I just don't give a shit anymore. I'm just like, whatever.
If they're gonna fuck it up, at least make it cool. Like, make people be like, wow, instead of what happened.
Right. I think I'll say this. Like, this is the last thing I'll say on it. When I went on there and I talked to Baby Seal on SEAL Team 7 the other day, I get the feeling, and I might be wrong, and Clark, if you're watching this, I feel free to confirm with me, but I feel like the people that are excited for the future of this series are excited for the potential of what could happen and hoping that everything ties together nicely and that we didn't just spend 8 years of our lives waiting. Well, it'll be 12 by the time that's over, but 13 actually. That hopefully part 3 will right the ship, I guess, if that's how you want to put it. That it'll all tie together and it'll all make sense and it'll all work out, right? And on some level, I get that. I'm not going to sit here, and I think now that I have a more level head about it and I'm not like sitting here fucking seething over it, like I feel like I can see where the positive side is coming from more so than I used to be able to. And I think like talking to Clark has helped me see that, because like while I don't particularly like the direction it's going in, there are a lot of people that do, and it's not my job to shit on their parade. You know what I mean? Like I'll play the game because I think the gameplay is fun, and I think there are moments in the story that I really do love. The ending just didn't happen to be one. So I will say that, like, I hope these people get the game that they wanted, it may not necessarily be the game that I wanted.
At least as long as someone's liking it.
As long as people are happy,
too.
like, whatever, you know, like, I'm not going to sit here and shit on their parade, even if I don't like it, because that's not my job, and it's not my...
someone's liking it.
Right.
Another theory I just came up with on the true ending. Okay, picture this, ladies and gentlemen, all right? The final battle is happening. Cloud is entering the live stream in all remake 4K glory, right?
Sora, Donald, and Goofy pop up and...
No.
Kidding.
10,000 frames per second. I'm not a frames per second guy, so I don't know what even that means. And he's like, Sephiroth's in his fucking Yakuza, took his shirt off in sexy mode. And Cloud's like coming down and he fights him. And they're both in fucking 4K glory. Yakuza, take your shirt off, final boss fight thing. And Sephiroth is like beats Cloud. You have the fight, but Sephiroth beats Cloud. And Cloud's like on the ground trying to get to his feet. He's mustering everything he can. But keep in mind, motherfuckers, this shit's a multiverse. Another hole opens in the live stream. They're in that black room, right? So you see this little light source and this wormhole opens. Horse hoof, 32-bit Cloud comes in and finishes the deal. He's the one that beats fucking 4K remake Sephiroth.
Dude,
that'd be cool.
So I had this fucking off-the-wall theory that is completely not based on anything, really. It's just what I think would be fucking hilarious and would just totally... Now, this is the petty me coming out, but if instead of, like, the Omni-Slash that we know of, that, like, 15 different portals open up.
Oh, and all the clouds?
And all the different clouds from all the different multiverses.
That would be cool to see, though,
fucking come out and just... Omni-Slash Sephiroth one at a time.
That would be fucking cool, man, actually.
There is no way that's happening.
Get your boy the Gooch on the line. Tell him to call Nomura, and then it has to happen.
There's no way in hell that happens, and that literally...
would be kind of cool. That
is literally just a joke theory, but...
I don't think that would redeem the multiverse, but it would make it, like, somewhat... Like, not, I don't know if worthwhile is the word.
Right.
But at least putting a good use to it.
Right. I just think it would be hilarious, because I think that would be dumber than fuck if that happened.
Really? I think it'd be kind of cool.
It would be cool, but in the idea that they're just going to hammer down on the multiverse thing.
But if they like weave that is something that can happen in the story of the third game, you know,
right,
and
but
then it happens.
I also don't think there's multiple versions of the characters. By the way, it's weird how it works, but I'll maybe explain it to you later at some point. But
yeah,
I don't think there's multiple versions of each character. I think there's just
but there would have to be because
I'll explain it later. But
Zack in the main timeline's dead.
Right, kinda.
What do you mean?
We'll get into that. We'll talk about it later. Anyway, so video game endings. While we're there, let's not get on another goddamn tangent. Let's actually talk about it.
I kind of said it a little bit earlier. Sorry, but to me, there's the two absolute worst kinds of endings you can get. Like, there's endings you can hate. There's endings you can love. But the worst kind of endings are, okay, what happened? And, okay, why did that happen? Those are the two worst kinds of endings, in my opinion.
I would disagree. I think there's another third worst ending. And I think for me, it's when everything that you've done up to that point doesn't matter.
Doesn't mean anything. Yeah,
like, okay, I will take a perfect example. Now, it's been fixed with a patch, but Mass Effect 3.
I knew you were going there, man.
Mass Effect 3. And it's what sucks about it is that Mass Effect was always a game about choices.
Yeah.
And that your choices mattered and they affected things, because honestly, like, if you look at the games, your choices mattered. So if a character died in Mass Effect 1, they did not come back in Mass Effect 2 or 3. If a character died in 2, they did not come back in 3. So if you did the suicide mission at the end of 2 and half of your party dies, they're not going to be there for part 3. And then you get to part 3, and then at the ending, nothing fucking matters anyway. Like,
are the characters that are supposed to be dead even in the cutscene? Because that would be bad. I've never played Mass Effect 3.
No, I don't believe so.
Okay.
No, they're not.
Like
No.
PS1 cutscene where it's just like a video and it's like it's like the Krogan's there. It's like, wait a minute, he died. I had him killed off in Mass Effect 2. He wasn't even in this game.
No, they aren't in the cutscenes, but it's Mass Effect is always the one that I go to whenever I think of endings that fail to land after all the setup that's been done, because it is the perfect example. And this is why I compare it a lot to Remake, Rebirth, and then the third game, because Mass Effect was always going to be a series. That was the whole point behind it. It was always going to be at least a trilogy, and it was about choices. It was about, cause and effect, everything else. And so I compare it to Rebirth, even though it's kind of a different scenario, because we are at a point where now we've had 2 endings that are A, mindfucks, B, are...
Yeah, but there's... When you say mindfuck, that can be a good thing, but
it can be.
Let's clarify that these are like the bad kind.
Well, yeah, and obviously that's subjective, but for me it was the bad kind.
Yeah.
But that's why I'm a little bit worried about part 3, because the way part 1 and 2 have ended, and there's the Mass Effect clause where just because 1 and 2 might have been good in certain departments doesn't mean part 3 is going to have a satisfying finale, and you might walk away from part 3 of the remake series being like, what the fuck, why was that even worth it? Like,
yeah,
it's kind of like, and not even just video game endings, I think we should really just talk about endings in general.
Yeah, that's what I mean, everything.
And I think it's harder to end a series than it is a single body of work, because when you're ending a single body of work, you are drawing off of everything that was in that work. You're not looking at the future, you're not looking at whatever. If you are doing a single project, you're more likely to end that in a satisfying way, in my opinion, than you are something that you have to go back to game 1 to make references to, that you have to go back to game 2 to make references to. Like, you have to make sure that no matter what choices are made, your ending reflects what the player's experience through all of those things. And so I think, to me, it's kind of like Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones ended...
Yeah, I heard the ending was really bad.
It's fucking terrible. But it was, number one, there were a lot of factors on that. The book that was pertaining to that part had not been written yet. Yeah. So they kind of told, George R.R. Martin told them how it was going to end, and then the showrunners kind of just ran with what they wanted. And so there's a lot of disconnect between the ending and the rest of the show.
That makes sense why it ended up like that then.
Right.
Crappy.
And so I have to, it's funny that we mentioned me interviewing Sakaguchi, because I actually want to bring up something that was from that interview that I asked him, and it was basically, why doesn't he like sequels and or remakes and remasters? And his comment basically boiled down to, I have to go and get back in the mindset that I was in when I created my original work. And unfortunately, that is almost impossible to do, because the fans that are expecting you to create that sequel, to create that remake or remaster, have certain expectations going into it because of their experience. And for a creator, they love their works that they make, but because they're creating things, they're on to the next thing. So whenever
it's a creative outlet at the end of
the day.
Right.
So whenever for like Final Fantasy, the reason he liked it as an anthology instead of like a sequel series is that he was able to create new experiences every single time. And I asked him too, like, how does your personal life affect things when you're making games? And he says, sometimes it's a very big inspiration, and it can cause me to being in a certain mindset when I go in with my creative ideas. And so to make sequels and remakes and stuff, I have to basically relive those things and or pull together plot threads that I created in order to make a compelling video game or a compelling story. And he said it's very hard for me to do that, and that's why I don't like doing sequels or going back to old works and remaking or remastering them. And I agree with that. Like, I think as a creator, it's hard to go back and see, hey, okay, I created this part of the game, and now I have to make that part of the game be realized in its sequel.
Yeah, it confines the shit out of you too when it comes to like writing, because you have to stay within the world you've already set up.
And the problem is
if you've be good anyways.
Yeah, and the problem is if you've already set up that world, the fans expect certain things from that world. Mm-hmm. And if you try to retcon or do something in the sequel that is not within the rules of the world you established, people are going to not like that.
I think it's dumb.
And I think sequels are really hard because it's hard to capture lightning in a bottle twice. Mm-hmm. And so creating a sequel, typically you see them in like Hollywood and stuff like that. Typically they're not very well liked. They're pretty.
Somebody always say there's always like a detrimental, like a downsize in sales for sequels. Like
Square's a perfect example. Everything after Original 7 that's within the 7 canon has sold
depleting,
has depleting sales. And then you have Final Fantasy 13, which 13 sold really, really well. Mm-hmm. And then 13.2 didn't sell that great. And then 13.3...
Which is unfortunate, because 13.2 is a great fucking game, actually.
13 Lightning Returns sold even way worse. So, historically, sequels have not done well. We are potentially seeing that right now with Remake and Rebirth, even though Rebirth is 1,000 times a better game.
Oh, yeah.
Remake is possibly going to be the best-selling game in this series. I think obviously you'll have third game sales for part 1 and 2 because people are waiting to play the whole series.
There's a lot of those people.
Right. There's people waiting to play the whole series until it's all out. There are people waiting to play the whole series on PC. Like, there are going to be post-launch sales years into the future. Mm-hmm. But historically, Square franchises have not sold particularly well. And there are other... In general,
like, usually there's always depleting sales when it comes to sequels. Almost always, I would say.
Right. Now, there is a slight alteration to that Square itself has experienced, and I'll say this because while Final Fantasy as a series isn't a sequel series, certain games have sold better on the back of a game that came before it.
Yeah, like Final Fantasy VIII.
Yeah, Final Fantasy VIII. So Final Fantasy VII sold 11 million copies at one time. I think it's up to 12 or 13 now. But the original Final Fantasy VII sold that many copies. 8 came out and was the fastest selling Final Fantasy in the franchise for several years until Final Fantasy 13 came out and broke that record.
Yeah.
So that means that 9 didn't have great sales, by the way. Not just depleting sales, but not that great sales.
Yeah.
10 did really well, but still didn't break the record that 8 set. 11 was an MMO, and I don't really know how you count sales.
Yeah.
Besides, like, player accounts and stuff like that. Then you have Final Fantasy 12, which is rated really high on Metacritic, and I don't know the actual sales figures for that game, but I don't think... It wasn't as great as 8 or 13 in sales, like, at least initially. Mm-hmm. But 13 came out and then completely just demolished 8's record.
Yeah.
Sold the highest of, or the fastest of any Final Fantasy in the franchise.
One that was like on a next gen system.
Right.
The trailers looked really good.
Right.
It was coming to PlayStation and Xbox too, wasn't it, or not?
Right.
So
there is a history of sales getting better, but it's mostly, I think, because people are looking at each Final Fantasy as a new experience, and it doesn't suffer from the sequel sales depletion
Yeah.
as opposed to
Because
games that are actually in sequential order.
yeah.
But anyway, back
I
to
think
endings.
yeah. But I think like a sequel can ruin an ending. Like Final Fantasy 13 2
Right.
was a really fucking good game, and then the ending was dog shit because it basically made everything worthless that you did. Like you mentioned earlier, that's one of the 3 bad endings, and it made the whole journey and even the first game completely worthless, basically, just to set up a fucking third game. Like, there's no reason other than to set up a third game. And when it comes to sequels, when you're doing like actual sequels instead of like an anthology, like you said, I sometimes I like direct sequels, but it has to be done right. If you're gonna do a direct sequel to the first story, let's say, the first story can't be hurt by that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like you
They have
can't
to
have
they have to complement each other.
yes, and both of them also should stand on their own. That's
Right.
like a big thing for me.
That's
And I think
so I'm glad you brought that up. And I hate to keep harping on this remake rebirth thing because I don't want this episode to turn into like an entire
yeah.
recap of the whole thing. But I think that's why it's so hard, because remake and rebirth complement each other, but they advertise them as standalone games. And the problem with that I have is that even though they do have the story so far to catch you up and stuff like that, to kind of give you the most important information you need.
Yeah, but
to me, it
makes it rely on the previous game.
Right. It makes it still rely on the previous game.
Mm-hmm.
And I also feel that, like, when you do that, nothing replaces an experience.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Okay, imagine just Rebirth was the only game. And that if that was the intro to that game, you'd be like, what the fuck? You know what I mean?
Right. Well, it's like okay, so I've played Rebirth, I've finished it. There is no way these games are standalone.
No.
I mean, you can play them standalone. Like, obviously, you don't need to play the first one. It's not a requirement. So it's standalone in that way, but if you are someone that enjoys story, it's not a standalone game. And I also think that it suffers from the idea that you kind of need to have played the original. You kind of need to have played some of the compilation, like, to understand some of the
understand completely, kind of.
Right. So I don't like the idea that they're advertised as standalone games when that's kind of not true. So, but that's my point on that one.
But like what I was kind of saying earlier is, like, there's also different kinds of like that kind of a sequel, because you look at like the Dragon Quest series, right? Like, yeah, Dragon Quest 2 is a sequel to Dragon Quest 1, but it takes place like hundreds of years later. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I prefer sequels maybe like that than I do direct sequels, unless the ending was really fucking good and something happens right before the credits roll. Then it's like, okay, baby, I'm locked in. Like,
so,
like the Xenoblade games, man. Like, fuck, oh my god, I love those games so much.
I'll ask you this question: do you like when you know that a game is going to have a sequel, like let's say Mass Effect?
No, I hate that.
Or would you prefer to get the original work, see the ending, and then find out there's a sequel?
Yeah, that one. Well, fucking Castlevania Lords of Shadow. Did you play? That was the only one you played, you said, right? Do you remember the ending, dude?
Yeah.
So, like, that was one of the, and this is a big reason why I wanted to talk about this topic, because I want to talk about like our favorite endings and like some bad ones. But Castlevania Lords of Shadow has one of the greatest fucking endings of all time. And unfortunately, Lords of Shadow 2 sucks ass and does nothing with the momentum from this ending. But oh my god, man. Like, anyone who's played a Castlevania game, and even though Lords of Shadow is like a reboot, basically, like a whole separate timeline, but anyone that knows Castlevania is like 99% of the games take place in like just like the Middle Ages and stuff like that, right? Like they're using swords, and of course the main guys mostly use whips because they use the vampire killer.
Yeah.
But it's all like swords and like there's peasants and shit like that. It's that kind of a time period, right?
Right.
And there's never, other than Aria of Sorrow and like Dawn of Sorrow, where they're in like the future a little bit. They're in like 2001 and 2004, I think. It's even then when they go into like the castle, it's still like that like Victorian, medieval, Middle Ages.
It's like you're stepping back in time.
Exactly. And so when I can't remember exactly how the ending happens, but first of all, right near the end, you find out that Gabriel is fucking Dracula. Like the main character of the game, the Belmont is fucking Dracula. The clan that is literally founded upon killing vampires and keeping Dracula in check.
Which I thought was a really cool twist.
It was a great twist, dude. I'm not a big fan of Lords of Shadow because I hate that kind of like game, like hack and slashy games. But the story in that game was phenomenal, man. It was so well done.
It reminded me of Dante's Inferno a little bit, because basically, wasn't it that Gabriel was trying to find his dead lover?
Yeah, his dead lover. And he was killing the Lords of Shadow because he wants to, like, I can't remember, like, if he gets all their artifact, like, right, they each have like a thing.
Yeah,
if he can get all of them, he can basically bring her back.
Yeah, it's kind of the same. It's kind of the same story as Dante's Inferno a little bit, or at least similar to. Dante goes into hell and has to go through each circle of hell to try to find his love to bring her back, or at least take her to heaven or whatever it is. I can't remember the exact like plot line of it, but it's kind of similar to that.
Yeah, and then at the end, you're fighting like the boss, and I can't remember who the boss was.
I think it was Death.
Okay, and the stuff he's saying to you is like throwing you off, because in all the other Castlevania games, Death is Dracula's like second-hand man, right? Like sometimes Death is the top guy, but most of the time, like him and Dracula are buds. Like they're like chums.
Yeah.
And like some of the stuff he's saying to you in that final boss fight, especially as it progresses, is like, why is he saying this to me? Like why is he complimenting me? I'm fucking Gabriel Belmont, here to fucking kill him and put an end to this shit. And then all of a sudden, like right near the end, you're revealed you are fucking Dracula, the fucking Lord of Darkness himself. And like, yeah, you kill Dracula, and then isn't there like this whole like angel thing? Like you kill like this guy that's like revealed to be like kind of good too. And then,
I think your partner throughout the game,
the guy, Patrick Stewart's character.
Yeah,
the whole time you're like, man, that guy's kind of a dick, and then you fight him, and you're like, wow, that guy's kind of a dick. I thought he was gonna be like a good dude because he was part of like the whole like vampire, like Belmont clan or whatever, I think. And then you end up fighting and like having to like kill him, and it's like that's kind of fucked up too. But like the game really shows you the game from Gabriel's perspective really well, right? So you feel like, okay, I had to do that, but it sucks that I had to fight him, but he was kind of being a dick. And then at the end you're revealed to be Dracula, and then the credits roll, and you're like, wow, that was a crazy fucking twist that I never saw coming. And then the credits end, and it's like you're in your dark fucking like castle, like Dracula's castle. He's sitting on his throne, right? He's all old and like Dracula looking, like ribs showing and evil looking and stuff. And then fucking
it's like New York City or something in the background, isn't it?
No, well, you don't know this yet, and that's what was so amazing, is it's Dracula's castle, right? You're just seeing the inside. And then I don't know if it's Patrick Stewart's character or like a descendant of that character. And he comes in and says something, and then this fight breaks out, and it's in the castle, right? You're in like this gothic old castle, and then he like shoves the guy out the window, and as the camera cuts from inside the castle, all of a sudden it's outside, and it's like you're seeing all these like city lights and stuff, and they're like the castle's in the middle of like New York City, and the guy falls into like traffic, and there's like all these cars and like cop sirens, and like holy fuck, that was like
that ending was dope.
It was so good, man. One of the best endings of all time. And then it just ends, and you're like, holy fuck.
So mine might be kind of obvious, but it's more personal than anything. So I will defer to you for what is your favorite ending.
That might be it. Hold on. I think I have a whole list because I was going to do like a top 10 video, but dude, there are so many. I want to say, I can't remember what it is, but I want to say Chrono Cross had a really good ending. Did it? I can't remember.
I think it did.
Okay, hold on. Let me take a look. Another thing I love, and this is another reason why I love the Dragon Quest games, is you always get the victory lap. Like once you beat like the final boss, you always go to like every town in like the early games, like Dragon Quest 1 through 3 and maybe even 4. It's just you have to walk back to your castle, right? So it's up to you. You can go into each town and visit with the people, and they're like, wow, I can't believe like you guys did this. And like they either have cool shit to say to you or cool stuff to say about the world and how it's changing and stuff because of what you did. But in like the later Dragon Quest games, I shouldn't say later, but like all the Super NES era and stuff like that, it's part of like a cutscene. Like you beat the boss, and like now you go back because you're dropping off all your friends and like seeing all the towns that they're from, and like I just love the victory lap. To me, that is something I love in the Dragon Quest like part of the Dragon Quest series, but a part of why like I love their endings. But now that you mention it, Dragon Quest 11 has the best ending out of any game I've ever played, because it links it. They took, and spoiler alert if you haven't played it yet, but it took an approach that there were subtle hints to Dragon Quest like 1 and maybe 2 and 3 in Dragon Quest 11, but you have to keep in mind that because of the type of sequels that the Dragon Quest series are, there's always little hints to previous Dragon Quest games. So it went from like these little hints, and then the ending, like literally connecting all of them, and like doing this big fucking like love letter to the fans at the very end. And that was probably my favorite ending of all time. Okay, hold on. Yeah. So that one, another one that's like right fucking up there with me is Final Fantasy X. Is like, and
that was gonna be one of mine.
Yeah, and that one's an outlier, because it's not really, because if you know the story and all that, but to some people that might be a what the fuck happened ending, but I don't think so, because there's so much context that like
right.
You know it's gonna happen, kind of.
I think there's the what the fuck was that ending, but there's also like, for me, the emotional element of it.
That's like a bittersweet. Final Fantasy is really good at nailing bittersweet endings. Like 10 and 15. 15, man, had me like holding back tears on that one.
15's ending was really good, dude. Despite how the rest of the game tend to be.
Yeah.
I really did like Final Fantasy 15's ending.
It was so good.
So I would have to agree on 10. 10 was one for me because I didn't always have like what I would call the greatest relationship with my dad.
Right, yeah.
Same and I love my dad, don't get me wrong. We just were very similar in a lot of ways, and it caused us to butt heads for a long time. And like, I don't really talk about it a whole lot, but like, my mom worked third shift, so she was always either at work while I was at home or asleep. My dad was a truck driver, and he owned his own truck for a long time, and to do so, that meant he was out on the road, 2-3 months at a time sometimes before he'd come home for a couple days and stuff like that. Well, growing up like that, I just did not. It was almost like I just didn't know him. And so, like, we butted heads a lot when he would be home because, he'd come home and be a parent, and I wouldn't be receptive to that. And, didn't go to a lot of my baseball games or my, my wrestling matches or whatever.
Right, so you kind of deep down resent that a little bit.
Yeah,
right?
so
at the time, especially.
I at the time, you know, when I was growing up playing Final Fantasy X, I kind of just didn't. So
like that whole Jacked and Tidus thing.
Yeah, that really hit home for me. So I think more so now that I'm an adult, Final Fantasy X's ending works really well for me because me and my dad have a better relationship now, and I realized that a lot of the feelings I was having were personal and not
But it's also hard to respect someone that you don't really know.
Right. And so my problem is that I didn't realize when I was younger that my dad was doing what he had to do.
Oh, absolutely. You don't understand that.
Right. You don't understand that your parent is doing what they have to do to provide for you. And now that I'm an adult and have my own responsibilities and have a son to take care of, it hit me one day, and I went fishing with my dad, and I'm like, Dad, I have to tell you I'm sorry. I held onto this grudge against you for the longest time because of the way I grew up, and I realized now that, like, I'm the one that was harboring issues because I couldn't get over myself. And now that I am seeing those things as an adult, I was able to say, hey, I'm sorry. And we've had a really good relationship since then. And so Final Fantasy X now, as an adult, the ending hits me harder because Tidus goes through this journey where the entire time he hates his father. He thinks he's a drunk piece of shit. He thinks he's this arrogant douchebag that, like, he just can't stand him. He's always treated him like shit. You know, his mom didn't love him the way he thought she should because she was too busy trying to please Jacked and everything else. And so he loved his mom, but he also resented her in some ways. And I really resonated with Tidus.
Yeah.
And so Final Fantasy X will always have a special place in my heart. And Final Fantasy X's ending even more so because you end up fighting Jacked. And this guy that you've spent the entire game hating and thinking certain things of. And then eventually you come to realize that Jacked was doing what he thought he needed to do to rid the world of sin. And he wanted Tidus to come and save the world. And Tidus kind of fulfilled that prophecy without realizing what his father was doing.
Yeah.
And then eventually, in the end, Tidus says the words that he said pretty much the entire game, but didn't get a chance to say to Jacked, and that was his moment of letting it go. And it was so weird because instead of saying, I love you, Tidus said, I hate you.
And the way he says it, like, delivers it, too.
And the way he delivers it is the exact opposite of the words he's saying. And it really resonated with me because that's how I felt. You know, I'm not saying I hated my dad, but I didn't respect him in the way that I probably should have. And so in that moment when Tidus finally forgives his father for everything and lets go, that hits me really fucking hard. And then that scene at the end where Tidus disappears and him and his dad have a high five as they disappear.
Right.
Like,
I forgot about that part.
That fucking slaps. Like, that's an ending. Yeah. That's a good ending. And despite
many different levels and angles, too.
So many different levels. It's a bittersweet ending because Tidus reunites with his father in a way that he never thought possible. But at the same time, he has to leave the love of his life.
Yeah. Such a good ending.
That's why I don't like 10-2 a lot. Because, number one, it's kind of cringy.
It is. Oh, it's super cringy, especially
Number
now.
two, it kind of just lessens the impact of the ending of the first game.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's like, I don't want to be able to bring Tidus back.
Yeah.
He had his time to shine, and it was his time to embrace leaving and having a relationship with his father finally.
I think if they wouldn't have made the whole, like, the plot revolve around the Shuyin looking like Tidus, I think it could have been like a decent game story-wise. Like my only interest in that game was because the world of Spira was such a really well done world.
Right, I agree.
Like I don't like that the game was so linear, because I don't like that the way, like, it was very like unexplorable is what I should say, I guess. And I didn't like that about it. So when I say I loved Spira, that's not what I mean. But when I say I love Spira, I mean, like, you got to really know the world of Spira. And my curiosity, when I finally did go and play 10-2, was to see what happened to the world after, like, what this world could be without Sin coming back. Like, that curiosity alone is what made me kind of eventually want to play it.
And technically the canon ending is that Tidus comes back.
Yeah, and that's
because but then they did the radio drama or the short story or whatever, where fucking Tidus kicks a blitzball and it's actually a bomb and he fucking dies.
That's the dumbest thing ever.
And it's like, dude, I just try to separate 10-2 and that audio drama bullshit from the first game, because I feel like
you have to.
That's an example of the first game being like lightning in a bottle.
Yeah.
And then it feels like they did not take 10-2 very seriously.
Yeah.
Like it was kind of supposed to be a joke, maybe.
I mean, that also shows the duality of Square before, or like with Sakaguchi and post Sakaguchi right there too. It's like they just didn't get what made the original so good. Yeah. And I do want to say, when you were talking about how Sakaguchi said he had to get back in that mindset, I think another thing that maybe people that aren't creators wouldn't maybe understand is that you can't get back into that mindset exactly, because your life was different at that time.
Right.
You were essentially a different person, right? So I could see it not wanting to make a sequel, especially after such a lengthy amount of time, because you're never going to feel like you're going to do it justice, because you'll never be that person that you were back in 1997 or 1996 when you made the game, right?
Well, and the thing is, like, okay, Yoshinori Kitase, when it comes to this remake series, he has been saying things like, oh, I want my characters to have a happy ending, but with a twist or something. Like, so he's not in the mindset that he was in 27 years ago. So the works that he does now is going to reflect that.
Exactly.
And so I think that's another reason why people were concerned about the remake series, because they thought that, like, oh, he's just going to give everybody a happy ending. And I don't necessarily think that that's true, but I do think that there is that possibility based off the fact that he is a different person now and he values different things, and he's remaking one of his original works. So I think you're right. I think it is very hard for them to get in that mindset because they're different people now. We all are.
Yeah. Well, look at even like, for music example, look at like Green Day back in like the 90s and Green Day now. Like, it's not even like modern Green Day is not very, like, nobody likes Green Day now. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to say the music shit, maybe it's all right, but it's not like it was. When they were at that part in their lives, that's when they were the best.
Well, and if you think about it too, when we listened to that music back in that day when it came out, we were different people, and that's why it rang true with us, or we liked it or whatever. But, you know, you ever go back and listen to something and you're like, this isn't as good as I remember. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, or you even play a game that you used to love and you're like, this isn't as good as I remember.
Dude,
like,
that sucks when that happens.
I know.
That's a game you loved and you go back. We should don't say anything. We'll do it next episode. We'll do it on that.
We actually already did that, remember?
Did we? Oh.
Yeah. Because I labeled Enter the Matrix one of my favorite games. And then I said I went back and played it and it was fucking dog shit.
Was that, we did a whole episode on like games that we loved that turned out to be shit?
I think we might have done something similar, but I don't, maybe we'll not necessarily. Yeah. But it's a mindset thing. It's who you were at that time, why it resonated with you, you know, and everything else. And so it's why sequels are hard.
Yeah. Back to endings.
And endings, really. Yeah.
And endings. I think Final Fantasy IX is another one that really fucking kicked me in the balls. Like it like kicks you in the balls, and then like oh my god. First of all,
the little baby VVs.
Your fishing story really brought the sad boys out in me. Like I was like fighting back the tears there. But the are
you joking or
no, I'm fucking dead serious when you were telling like when you went fishing with your dad and stuff like that. Big old sad boys. But Final Fantasy IX, I say that because like Final Fantasy IX's ending hit me in the sad boys like real hard, man. So like the same way like Final Fantasy X resonated with you is why Final Fantasy IX resonates with me. But like not the same way, but in like the same kind of like the reason I relate to it is based on like what like my upbringing was, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Which is why like because I know how you kind of have the same duality that I do. Like you're like Final Fantasy VII is my favorite, but Final Fantasy IX is so special to me, right? Like you kind of have that, and that's how I am too. Like Final Fantasy IV is my favorite, but Final Fantasy IX is so special to me, and it's because like growing up, I didn't really get along with my parents or my family members and stuff like that. Like I didn't enjoy hanging out with my cousins, like really for the most part. Like you know what I mean? Like I wasn't like a big family person.
Yeah.
And like my friends were always my family growing up. And I feel like that's like Zidane's story, right? Like he has nothing essentially, but his friends. And as he goes through the game, like his friends at the beginning are his family, the theater ship, right? Obviously shit goes down and he loses like some of them, right? And blank temporarily. But that's his family at that point, right? And then like yeah, he gains all these friends and he's willing to help them out and all that. And that's like his quote is like, you don't need a reason to help people. That's always resonated with me my entire life. Like I will do everything I can if somebody needs my help that I care about. And especially friends. Like when it comes to friends, I've always been like that. And but when that part when Zidane learns like who he is, and he's like, wow, I am like nobody, like I'm nothing essentially, right? And I have nothing. Everything I have is worthless, basically. And then that part when I think it's in what's the place called when he's in like I think he's in the Invincible at that point, isn't he? Where he's like sitting on that like throne almost thing.
Oh,
and there's all those eyeballs in the walls.
Yeah,
they look like fleshlights.
It's either that or is it Memoria? Is that what it's called?
No, Memoria is the final place.
Oh, okay, yeah. Then it's the Invincible then.
Yeah,
because Garland and all them.
Yeah, he's like aboard it and like imprisoned.
They reference that in 14, by the way.
Okay, and
then
when
it's pretty cool when they do too.
Do they have the fleshlights in the wall?
No. Well, yeah, kind of actually.
That's funny. But as he's coming out and he is at rock bottom, right? And like one by one, his friends are like come back and they're like, no, dude, like you have us, man. Like we had you when we needed you, and you have us for life. Like we are your family, and like that's always resonated with me. And then the part where at the end everybody leaves and they're like absolutely heartbroken that he goes back, right, to help his like actual brother, Kuja, right? He's the only family I have. I can't leave him, right? Even, no matter what our differences, I can't let this end like this. And I thought that was like excellently done too, like absolutely beautiful. And then the fact that Vivi's dead, right? Like the whole game, that he's going to die, but at the same time, everyone dies. So like that's the whole death.
Yeah.
I had another reason that game always resonated with me is like I had a lot of death in my family when I was very, very young, and like that whole thing, it's like okay, like it's the whole message of there's some parts in that game where it's like, I'm going to die, so who cares, right? But then there's the whole, like, by the end of it, you're like, I'm going to die, so I might as well make the best of it. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like, you got to give yourself like the best life you can, because yeah, you're going to die, but so is everyone. So
well, it's like, it's like finding purpose.
Exactly.
You know, even when you feel like you don't have any.
Yeah. And then like all the little VVs. So it's like, it's super fucking sad because VV's gone and he's like one of the fucking best characters ever.
Yeah.
And you know he stopped. Like, I think using the word stop made it even sadder. Like when the black mages always like said we stop, that's like worse than death, right? Because it's like you're not even given the courtesy of being said that you died. Like, like you passed on as a person.
Well,
you
stopped. It's like when you get to the Black Mage Village.
Yeah,
and
they're in the factory.
And they basically just like tell you like this is how life is for them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, that's really fucking sad, you know?
Yeah.
But it's like Vivi found his purpose, and that purpose was to help his friends.
Yeah. And then
that's so like okay, so I just want to point this out too.
Yeah.
That's when like power of friendship shit is completely okay with me.
Oh, it's beautiful.
When you tie it into the themes of the game of finding purpose in life, finding meaning, and your meaning is to help your friends and family and make your life to the fullest.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I'm okay with power of friendship stuff. Like, that's when it doesn't bother me, just to clarify.
Yeah. But so anyways, you see all the little VVs and stuff like that, right? And you're like, okay, like it's nice that that's there at least, right? And then like they're doing the play and stuff, and everyone's there but Zidane, right? And he's gone. He hasn't been seen. Like, as far as you, the player, know, and all the characters know, he's dead. So this whole time, the two best characters in the game, two of my three favorite fucking Final Fantasy characters of all time, are dead, right? Before the ending even plays out. And it's like, you're like happy because you see like all this stuff. They're celebrating that it's been so long since like all this bad shit happened, and people are just trying to move past it in the best way they can. But deep down, you're like, this is fucking sad. There's fucking the two best fucking guys aren't here, right? Like, that's fucking sad. And then I can't remember. Garnet's on the stage, right?
I think
at some point. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, like, one of the characters that's supposed to be in the play or something, I can't remember exactly. It's been a while since I played it. But he's like wearing the robe, and then he fucking like pulls the hood down. It's fucking Zidane. And Garnet just like, dude, man, it's making me sad right now. Garnet just like fucking like throws everything off and is just rushing towards him. And it's just like, oh my god, that one hits me in the feels.
And then they end up getting married at the the very end of the game. They get married, don't they?
Well, no, she's in that dress and she's like running to him, and she's like, she's like mad that like he did that, like he went back. You made me fucking lose you, right? Like, she's super mad there. And then they just like hold each other, and it's just so fucking powerful. I'm just like crying like a baby over here. Dude, that ending is fucking so good to me.
So I would say, if I were gonna go with the ending that probably hit me the hardest emotionally, it would have to be Shadowbringers for 14.
Yeah.
Shadowbringers has one of the most powerful endings I've seen in a video game. Like, you spend the entire expansion basically thinking this guy's the villain, and then as the expansion goes, you're like, you start to sympathize with him.
Oh, I always like those guys.
And then by the end, you're like, I don't want to kill him. Like, it sounds crazy because you're like, this is the villain. This is the main antagonist of the expansion. But the way
he's got good reasons for what he was doing.
The way 14 does it with this character is just fucking phenomenal. And it's like all of the build up to this moment where you finally face off with him. And as I'm playing it on stream, I sat there and I'm like, I don't want to walk in this building.
Yeah.
I don't want to fight him because I know I need to. I know it saves the world if I do. But he's such a well-written villain that you just it makes you feel differently about good versus evil and why people do the things that they do. And his reasoning was basically that he wanted to bring his people back, and to do so he needed to essentially destroy these different worlds to do so. And while that makes him the villain in everyone else's story,
oh yeah, he's the hero in his.
On his side, he's the hero of his people and of him.
Yeah.
So it's so well written and so well done that, like, Emmett Selk is one of my favorite characters of all time. And I actually named my son after him. Like,
Yeah.
He's just such a well-written character, and I absolutely love Emmett Selk. So I would say 14's up there as one of my favorite endings of all time, for Shadowbringers at least. I would say that one of the better endings I've played is probably Lords of Shadow.
Good. Oh, before you jump away from Shadowbringers too much, I just want to say, like, that I love those kinds of villains, and that's why, like, Sorrow from, like, Dragon Quest IV is probably my favorite villain of all time, because like everything he did was for a very good reason, right? Like, he was like the most, like, relatable to villain ever. And then I think it makes the ending so much better because, like, when you said you didn't want to step in there because you're like, you look, man, I sympathize with this fucking guy, right? Like, he's doing the right thing if you think about it in a way, right?
Right.
And it's the same with Sorrow, but by the time you face Sorrow, like, his whole thing is, and I like Terry from Dragon Quest VI for the same reason, because they're both characters where, and I think that's why Toriyama made Terry, because he wanted, like, a character similar in drive to Sorrow, but to be a part of the hero's party instead of like the bad guy. But basically, it's like someone you love is being basically, like, tormented and, like, tortured by, like, the humans in this case, like in Sorrow's case, right? And whether it was, like, a specific group of humans or not, Sorrow knew that in order to protect the person he loved, he needed to get stronger, because he wasn't able to protect her. Like, she ends up dying, right, in the original Dragon Quest IV. And he becomes obsessed with gaining power to protect the ones he loves. And even, like, the monsters and stuff, like, people kill monsters all the time. Well, the monsters were the only ones that sympathized with him when Rose was killed, right? So he wants to protect them. He wants to, whatever. His path is a righteous one, but he gets so much power that he goes out of control and turns into that Estark like creature, right? Which I always hate. Like, the new games call it Sorrow the Manslayer, but he's also called Sorrow the Manslayer when he's not in that form, which is, like, stupid and confusing. So I was like his original NES game where it was Necro Sorrow. In Japanese, he's called Death Sorrow. So Necro Sorrow, I think, is the better naming for that form of him. But in Dragon Quest IV, you go into that castle being like, this guy fought for a good cause, and now we need to set him free because he's not himself anymore. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like both of those things when you go there. And obviously, like, it's not going to be as powerful as Shadowbringers because this was an NES game, right?
Right.
But it's still, like, just if that game ever got remade to look like Dragon Quest XI, oh my god, dude! Like, some of those moments are so powerful.
There's actually a specific scene in Shadowbringers, and it's where you go through this cave, and there's basically, like, cave paintings, that explain the background of what happened to Emmett Selk's people, and Emmett Selk actually explains what happened, and they show like every time he changes the subject or changes where he's going with his story, the cave paintings come into focus. So like he'll tell part of the story on this part of the cave painting, then he'll start talking about something that's happening in the next slide of the cave painting, and then he'll keep going, and then he'll tell the entire story of what happened to his people, and it's really, really well done.
Yeah, that sounds like direction-wise, that sounds
right.
Really good.
There's also another ending that I really, really love, and it's Persona 5 Royal. I won't talk about it because I know you eventually plan to play it, and I know there's some people that haven't played Royal. Basically, the gist of it is that you've spent an entire game talking to this character. Well, then this character ends up being the main boss, or the main villain, technically, of Royal. And he's more of what I would call a morally gray villain.
Okay. Like, he's not evil, but...
Right, he's not evil. He has good intentions, but it's a choice of morality, or it's a choice of... Well, we'll just go with morality, because it basically is. And the question that Persona 5 Royal asks the player is it better to live in reality or to believe something so blissfully ignorant that is your new reality? And so basically, the villain's power is that he changes reality into more positive things. So a lot of the characters in Persona 5 deal with loss, losing a parent, losing a sibling, or whatever. There's loss of something for every character, for the most part. Well, the villain of Royal basically changes that reality, and now everybody is back to their happy selves because the people they lost are no longer lost. It's like they never were gone.
Right.
And the only people that know what's going on are you, the player, like the player character, and another character from Persona 5 who actually died. They're now back. And so the villain at the end is basically like, you can get a good ending, a bad ending, and then like the best ending, I guess.
Oh, okay.
And one of the endings is that reality has changed. Everybody's happy. The villain tips his cap and walks away. And it's basically like, you made the choice to
stick with this,
be happy, and not live an actual reality, but more so what you would call a dream world or scenario or whatever. And basically it's the choice of, do you accept the world as it is, or do you deal with it in your own way, knowing that not everything can be perfect, but it is life and it goes on. And it's
that sounds really well done.
It is really, really well done. And in fact, I believe there's a segment where you can choose not to fight the boss at all, and you get an ending.
Oh, wow.
You can take him up on his offer, which is, he offers you the choice of fighting him and carving your own path, or following his path and moving on. So it's really, really, really well done, and I really like the ending for that.
Yeah, no doubt. I feel like that's kind of like what, like we've been just like playing Dragon Quest X, and we're in like the version 2, and the what were those called? The prophecy princesses or whatever.
Yeah,
that was kind of similar, right? Like the guy comes and like grants them their wish basically, and then they're like, okay, we can have our wish, but we're sealed in this other dimension, or we could have not had the wish. And then the whole like two worlds thing where like we still don't know if the people in the fake world are gonna, like those kids who died, if they're gonna be able to cross over into the real world. We don't know that yet.
See, that's how I think multiverse or timeline should be done.
Yeah,
like it should be acknowledged that it's not. It should be more about, I guess, moral dilemma, I guess, than a mechanic for Deus Ex Machina type stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. But yeah, I'm excited to see what ends up happening with that story, because we don't know if the kids that died are going to be able to come back or not. But there's some sort of communication between the two worlds. Another one I want to mention, but just briefly, because I don't fully remember it right now because it's been so long since I played it. But the original Ninja Gaiden on the NES has a phenomenal ending. And I don't know if you knew this, but Ninja Gaiden was actually the first. It's known as the first game that had cutscenes, and it uses them so well. Like, oh my god, the story in that game is really, really well done. And I recommend it to anyone. If you're gonna play it, maybe use save states, because the last like 2 levels are unbelievably difficult. And another one that was really good was Red Dead Redemption.
Yeah, Red Dead Redemption has a great ending.
One, hey?
Yeah, Red Dead Redemption.
A big part of why, like, to me, when a game has a like fucking 10 out of 10 ending, I don't like to play the sequel. And I felt Last of Us had a 10 out of 10 ending.
I agree.
And that's why I refuse to play Last of Us 2. And same thing with Red Dead Redemption. It had an excellent, but I do understand, apparently the sequel is actually a prequel, right?
Yeah, it is.
Redemption. So like I understand that, but like to me, when a game is so well done, like in its ending and like finality, and everything feels like that's what it should be, I have a really tough time playing a sequel, because then to me it feels like the sequel is there to be a sequel and not because the story needed more.
Right. Yeah, I forgot. Red Dead Redemption does have a fantastic fucking ending.
Same with Last of Us. Like, I remember when I finished The Last of Us, the first thing I did was went on like internet forums, because there's the whole thing where did you kill the doctor? And I think the best part of that is it barely changes the ending at all. But for the player, it's like, fuck, did I have to do that? Like, I remember looking it up. Like, it's such a psychological effect on only the player, and it does not like really change the ending at fucking all. But the fact that it like that one spot in that ending made me like, am I a piece of shit? Like, you know what I mean? Like, that was the only ending that ever made me like think like that. Like, wait, did I have to do that? And there's nothing in the game that says you shouldn't do it, right?
Right.
But there's nothing in the game that also says you should. It's just an option. And I did it, and I was like, what does this say about me? Like, I just remember being like, wait, first thing I looked up is, do you have to do that? Second thing I looked up is like, what's the consensus on this? Like, am I a piece of shit here? Like, that ending really got me thinking.
So it's funny that you say that, because I feel like, The Last of Us did a really good job of that. And I like endings that make me think too. It's not necessarily like that I enjoy convoluted endings.
Yeah,
I like that. I don't either.
Unless
I like
explained well.
Yeah, I like endings that that I take a message out of, you know? Like, I like to insert myself into the main character's head and think, like, what would I do if I were in that main character's body? Like, if I were that character, what would I do personally? Yeah. And when an ending makes you think that way, that means that the rest of the game has conditioned you to make certain choices or do certain things
like based on your experiences in the game.
that immerses you in the ending.
Yeah,
And when you can tie the game together like that, I think that's when endings really hit the most. And I agree. I think The Last of Us is a great example of that.
But I think not only is it a great example of that, as like putting yourself in the player's shoes, I think it's a great example of like completely outside of the game being like, did I have to do that? And like, what does that say about me that I did that? You know what? Like it was, I don't know, man. It was on such a like fourth wall breaking level because it really had nothing to do with the game. That part there.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't change what happens afterwards, really. It doesn't, they don't really bring mention to it after it happens. It doesn't like, it's not like I didn't do it because I thought Joel would do that, right? I did that given the fucking circumstances and what my options were.
Right.
That's what I chose, and was like, that was like crazy to me. I don't know. That was
okay.
That was the only game to me that ever reached outside of the game and did something like that to me.
Right. Now, I do have a question. When you play games where you have the choice to be good or evil, or at least make decisions that may not be evil, but aren't necessarily like the nice guy, do you ever choose to be the dickhead?
I honestly, because there's two types of games to me, and there's character driven where the main character is like a strong character, and fleshed out character with a background and like stuff like that. And then there's the games where I am that character. In Dragon Quest, you're always that character is supposed to be you. You are the descendant of Erdrick. You are the hero. And that's why he's silent protagonist, right? And that's why like characters like Link are weird because he has a name and he kind of has a bit of a it's hard to say he's got a personality, but he has like a reputation.
Right.
And to me that's weird because it's like kind of in between then, and I don't really like that. But something like Final Fantasy and stuff, I can't compare to something like what is it? Knights of the Old Republic.
Right.
Right? Because to me, Knights of the Old Republic is you are that character. That character is you. And I feel like there's not a lot that do that in JRPGs unless they're really old. But so like I said, I'm not a big Western RPG guy, but this is the odd one I played. And when I play them, I always answer how like I honestly would answer. I literally could give two fucks on what morality that's gonna put my character on. I always answer completely honestly, and it almost always gives me like the shittiest build because I then don't get, because usually if you're like all good guy, you get like extra perks, and if you're all bad guy, you get extra perks. And I always end up like doing a more difficult run because of it. But I always answer honestly because to me, the story I want to experience in those games where you're the character is the story that I myself should experience, because then it's based on me and my choices and stuff like that.
Right. It's kind of why I like Mass Effect, because there are times where I'm like, yeah, I want to punch that guy. But then there's times where like, I'm like, nah, I understand where this character's going through or whatever, So it's like,
exactly.
Right. Yeah. I don't always answer good or evil or like Paragon or Renegade, how they do it in Mass Effect. Like, now, if I'm going for like a specific run, like if I'm playing Star Wars and I want to make a Sith, I'm obviously going to go do like dickhead things because that's what my character is supposed to do. But that's more of like a self-insert character.
That's where you're really like, yeah, that's the other thing, right? Like, this almost brings up like, what is a fucking role-playing game? Because when I'm playing a Western RPG or like Dragon Quest, I'm playing me. I'm not playing a role.
Right.
But when I'm playing Final Fantasy, or I'm playing, you know what I mean? Or I'm playing Knights of the Old Republic as a Sith, I am now playing a role. I am playing a character. I'm not playing myself. So that's another thing. Like when it comes to like RPG, because like so many people are like, oh yeah, Call of Duty's an RPG because you're playing a character, right? You're playing a role.
Yeah.
And that's where like I don't think, like, I don't know if RPG is the best word to even describe the genre at this point. But to me, that's different because like when you hear of people role playing when they're like in like I remember like old school forums, you have like a role playing forum, right?
Or like D&D.
Yeah, D&D. It's a role playing game. You're playing a character. You're not playing yourself for the most part, right? But you could play yourself, just like in a Western RPG. So like, yeah, I don't know. It's like I don't know if I'm playing a role in that in a lot of those Western RPGs because I'm just playing myself
Right.
in that world.
Right. So, like, I personally will typically go the good route, regardless of if it's harder or easier or whatever. I usually on games like that, if I really enjoy the game, I'll play 2 playthroughs. I will do
Right.
one where I'm the good guy, and I'll do one where I'm a dickhead. And then sometimes, if I really, really like the game, I will play a 3rd playthrough where I just answer the way I would answer.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, that's my first playthrough.
Yeah, that's how I always do it.
But most of my answers usually typically align with the hero character.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's just a coincidence or like if that's how I actually think, but I don't know. I have a hard time being a dick in video games. So,
I
yeah.
don't if it's something I would do in real life.
Right, same, yeah.
Like it's so funny though too, because when I do like I don't play games like that very often. But when I do and I like stream games like that, there'll be people in my chat that'll be like, "Holy shit! Like that was fucking not nice." like my buddy Vector, man. Whenever I do something that's not like above fucking water, he's always like, "Why would you do that to that person?" It's like, dude, fuck that guy.
So
it also made my I had like the weirdest character build in because of that, because in Knights of the Old Republic, you really need to be either light or dark or you don't like get the powers. But it didn't really bother me because I used blasters and grenades the entire game.
Yeah.
Like, and it was hard as fuck.
Didn't that game
Didn't
that game give you a choice at the end whether you wanted to be good or evil also?
Yeah, so at the very end,
Malik offers to let you join him again, right?
I think it's either that or you have to decide if you're gonna kill that one person. I can't remember.
Right.
It's like that girl.
Right.
If you kill her, then you get the bad ending. And if you don't kill her and let her kind of get away or whatever, then you get the good ending. Which kind of sucks because then it's just like that Mass Effect 3 where it's like all kind of for nothing because you made so many choices throughout the thing.
Right.
Only 2 endings. But it's still like, yeah, I don't know. I don't think I would consider that a good ending, but
right. So
what are like the worst endings to you?
That's what I was thinking about going into.
I think I have a list for that too.
Worst endings. Man, I don't know, it's tough because other than recency bias, there aren't endings where I don't know if I've played too many games where I hate the absolute fuck out of the ending. I did not like Remake's ending. I thought it was bad.
Yeah, those ones are bad.
I think yeah, I don't think Rebirth's ending's good either, but that's just personal opinion. I don't know, I'm trying to think of games that I did not really care for the ending. I'll let you go first and I'll think about it.
Yeah, so when it comes to bad endings, I'd like to step away from video games for a bit. I'm a big like Super Sentai Kamen Rider fan, and dude, it's so painful because I swear there's like a written rule. Whoever's writing each season of Kamen Rider, like each series, there's like a rule in the franchise that the ending has to be really fucking bad. And it's like, oh, and it just takes so much away. So you'll have like a favorite, like one of the favorite, like Gaim is like my favorite. And the ending to that isn't terrible. Like it's a lot better than all the other ones. But like for example, I think it was ffvii. ffvii is so good, and like you really like these characters, and then there's this like really phenomenal like ending, and then the last scene is like he's laying on the side of a hill with his friends, and he disappears, and you're like, the fuck? Like what? is he dead? Like, what does this even mean? And then the first reboot reboot. I don't even know what you're gonna call it. There's like two. You know how Japan always has like the Showa era of like movies, and then they'll do like Heisei era of movies and series, and how there's like a kind of like starting over point all the time. So the first like resurgence, I guess, of Kamen Rider was a Kamen Rider Kuga, and they decided, because with the original Kamen Rider they did a direct sequel series after that, so they kind of did the same thing with Agito, but it was a lot better than Kuga. Kuga was almost like watching the X-Files more than like a superhero thing. But anyways, Agito is like pretty good, and it's really good, and he absolutely destroys all the enemies and stuff, and like the big bad, like, and the whole story with Kuga and Agito is the suit like evolves and gets more and more powerful as time goes on, basically. And at the end of Agito, he reaches like this ultimate form that's never been like seen by anyone before, and he beats like the final big bad. And then you're like, oh fuck yeah, he did it! Like all the storylines are like coming together and everything's great. And then right after that, he beats the big bad. All the side characters are like, oh, he did it, fantastic, the world's saved. And then he starts running down the beach, goes like this, and explodes the main character, and that's how it ends, dude.
What?
That is a standard Kamen Rider ending right there.
Wow.
Yes.
And
the credits roll and plays sad music, and I'm like, what the fuck, dude?
If we're gonna go with bad endings to TV shows, Game of Thrones has to fucking be up there. I feel like Game of Thrones was one of the most popular things in the world.
That's true. It was
for like 8 or 9 years or so, and now you never hear anybody talk about it in a positive light.
No, you don't.
I never see anybody be like, I love Game of Thrones. Nobody fucking says that shit anymore, and at least not in the circles that I'm in do they talk about it in a positive light anyway. I did not like the ending of that. I feel like it shit on fucking 7 years worth of build-up.
Too bad. At least with Kamen Rider now, I know every single series, I'm expecting the world's shittiest ending. Like,
right.
Because it's just, you get used to it.
Right. And so for worst endings, Game of Thrones has to go up there for me. Mass Effect 3, of course, is fucking dog shit.
Yeah.
And then like, I don't know, man. I'm trying to think of games that have terrible endings.
Yeah, for me, probably one of the biggest is like Final Fantasy 13-2's ending is really bad. Sonic CD's ending is really bad if you don't get all the fucking time emeralds or whatever. It's just like your classic. I think Dr. Robotnik like throws a rock at you, and then like that's like the ending or something. It's like dumb as shit. I just I hate games. I hate when games, like especially like it happened a lot with like beat 'em up games back in the day, where if you didn't beat the game on hard mode, if you played it on normal, for fuck's sakes, you get like the shit, like the games. There's more game. Replay it on hard. Like fuck, that always pisses me off, man.
Yeah.
Even when it does it on easy, it pisses me off because like sometimes you don't have a lot of time or whatever, and you want to just blast through Streets of Rage, you know. And then you play it, you're like, oh, I'll just play it on easy. And then the game ends at level 6 instead of 8. And it's like, yeah, replay the game on hard mode if you want the true ending. I fucking hate that shit.
So I actually have to add one more because I forgot about this one. But, man, Fallout 3 had a fucking dog shit ending.
Oh, did it?
Before the DLC. So in Fallout 3... You've done this entire fucking game, right? And you're at the end, and basically to like save the world, it's Project Purity, you know. In order to save the world, you have to go into the radiation and fucking die. That's the ending.
That's the ending?
That's the ending. of the
So you just
original
walk
of the
into
original
the-
yes, in the original version of Fallout 3, you have to go to activate Project Purity. You have to go inside this radiation-filled room and like basically flip a switch, I guess it is. It's been a long time since I did this ending, so I'm trying to remember it off the top of my head.
So
But
why would that save anything?
because Project Purity, like if I remember right, it purifies the drinking water, like the world's water.
Oh, and that's the only way you can
Right.
save it. That doesn't
And
make sense.
it's not good. Like
That
it's just
sounds awful.
it's really fucking bad.
So when you said radiation, it made me think of one of the best endings ever. And when you said radiation, I was thinking of in Metal Gear Solid 4 when Snake is crawling through the microwave and his butt cheeks are exploding from all the radiation and stuff. But Metal Gear Solid 4 has a phenomenal ending, man. Guns of the Patriots, like holy shit.
Yeah.
Even like the final boss fight, like oh my god, they just tie everything in there and it's so well done. The ending's so long. I thought that they should have killed off Snake, but I do think the ending was really, really good, really well done. And they literally tie everything up. And I can see like that was supposed to be the last Metal Gear game. And I can see why. Like that was like the perfect ending. But to do 5 as like a prequel, I think is fine, honestly.
Right. Well, and then there's like there's two endings that I can think of that, and one of them is going to be really stupid because it's a platformer, but obviously Super Mario 2 was kind of dumb.
That was a shit one.
Gigantic meme.
That
like,
sucked.
Oh, it's not really Mario, it's all just a dream or whatever. And it's like, dude, come on, really?
That is a shit.
There's also Assassin's Creed 3, which is funny because I love that game.
I rage quit near the final boss.
But the ending is fucking terrible. Basically, like, you go into this, like, I don't know what you'd call, like, an ancient temple or some shit, and basically the
anima,
the angel or whatever she is, I can't think of the fucking name of all this shit. It's been so long since I played this game, but basically, like, you're told that Desmond either sacrifices his life and saves the world, or the solar flares hit the planet or whatever, and it's fucking so stupid, dude. It's just horrible. But
that sounds awful.
It is terrible.
Because the game has nothing to do with that.
Yeah, it's
Wow. That's so weird.
Yeah, it's dumb as fuck. I love the game, but the ending is shit.
The game, man, I did like the game, but I hate Ubisoft controls, man. Like, if you can't have the R2 button be the run button, the jump button, and the climb button when there's like a fucking boss sequence where you're chasing a guy through the fucking narrow streets in a ship, and there's like a timed, if he gets too far away, you fucking have to restart the whole thing. I rage quit so hard there, man.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the ending is definitely the hardest part to write. I think it always will be, because you have to make sure that everything you've set up to that point
comes
to fruition,
pays off.
And so, I don't know. It's one of those things where, like, I'm just...
Nothing's better than a perfect ending, though, man.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Like, yeah 1,000%.
Yeah. Like, this might be a perfect time to end this episode.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So, man, I am feeling pretty good.
Same here, bro. Same here. Gotta pee and take a big dump, but other than that,
thanks for sharing. All right, guys. Well, this has been our completely tangent-filled video or podcast episode, whatever the fuck you want to call it.
The best one yet.
The best one. Where we talked about video game endings and what it means to be a fucking failure. So
that doesn't sound so bad.
Yeah, I know. So that being said, don't forget to leave us a like on the video and or rate us on Spotify and iTunes. We
Tell
really
us
appreciate
your
it.
favorite and least favorite endings
Yeah.
and why as well.
Tell us your favorite and least favorite endings and why. And on that note, unless you have anything else to add, I think we will say our goodbyes. So, guys, don't forget to share the podcast wherever sharing is possible. And
Wherever it's socially acceptable to share podcasts.
right, wherever it is socially acceptable to share podcasts. Anyway, guys, that'll be it. So
We really just got higher as the podcast went
I know.
on,
How do we normally end this?
I'm Dookie03, aka Corey.
I'm Alex, aka Soldier First Class.
And this has been The Gaming Effect.
And this has been The Gaming Effect, episode 16, where we talked about video game endings and what failure is.
This ending!
As I'm failing to get out of this outro. Anyway, guys, thank you all for watching / listening. We all love you very much. Y'all have a good one, and we'll see you in the next one. Later, guys.